The wind howled through the broken walls of the old shelter, carrying with it the bitter sting of dust and cold. The sky above was a sickly gray, the sun a pale disk barely pushing light through the smog. On the horizon, the towers of the alien city loomed, tall, jagged spires of black stone and metal, half-eaten by time. Inside the shelter, a small group of alien children huddled together for warmth. Their skin was pale green, their eyes large and glassy in the dim light. They were thin, too thin, their cheeks hollow, their arms trembling from hunger. The oldest couldn't have been more than 12 by human measure. Thomas Hale sat in the far corner, leaning against a cracked support beam. His coat was torn at the sleeves, the inner lining long gone, but he didn't shiver. He was used to the cold by now. What he wasn't used to was the sound of small stomachs growling. He pulled a ration bar from his pocket. It was the last one. The small, foil-wrapped rectangle seemed heavier than steel in his hand. He stared at it for a long moment, feeling the hard corners through the wrapping. It wasn't much, maybe enough to keep him going for another day. He looked at the children. One of them, the youngest, lay curled on the floor, her breathing shallow. Her name was. She opened her eyes just barely and met his gaze. And that was it. Thomas unwrapped the bar without a word, broke it into 4 uneven pieces, and handed them to the children. Eat. They hesitated. They knew what this meant. Food was never shared freely here. Stared at the piece in her hand, then at him. You need this too, she said softly, her voice almost too faint to hear. Thomas shook his head. I'll be fine. It was a lie. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. The others began to nibble cautiously. Still watching him, broke her piece in half and tried to hand some back. He pushed her hand gently away. Keep it. Her eyes glistened, not just from hunger, but from something deeper. A shadow moved near the doorway. Thomas tensed, his hand drifting toward the length of scrap metal at his side. The figure stepped in tall, slender, and alien. A young woman, though by her species measure, she might be older than him. Her skin was a lighter shade of green, her hair bound with thin strips of copper wire, and her gaze sharp as a blade. It was. She looked first at the children, then at Thomas, her brow furrowed. Why? She asked. He knew what she meant. The rules of this district were clear. You fed yourself first if you wanted to survive. Sharing was weakness. They need it more than I do, Thomas said. Her jaw tightened. That is not how we live here. I'm not from here, he replied. For a moment they just stared at each other. Outside, the wind screamed against the broken walls. Then she stepped closer. Her eyes flicked to who was licking crumbs from her palm, and then back to Thomas. You've made yourself a target, she said. I was already a target. Didn't smile. Not like this. The overseer's men will hear of it. Thomas leaned back against the beam. Let them. She tilted her head, studying him like she was seeing him for the first time. The children will see you as leader now. I'm not looking to lead anyone. Doesn't matter, she said quietly. They'll follow you anyway. Somewhere outside, the sound of boots on stone echoed through the street, heavy, purposeful. Eyes narrowed. They're coming. Thomas rose slowly, gripping his scrap metal weapon. His legs felt weak. Hunger would do that, but his stance was steady. Get the kids to the back, he said. Didn't move. If they find you here, they will take you. You know what happens then. I know. The footsteps were closer now. The air seemed to tighten in the room, looked up at him, fear in her eyes. Thomas gave her a small smile. Stay quiet. The doorway darkened. 3 figures stepped inside, tall, armored, their faces hidden behind metal masks shaped like the snarling heads of some alien beast. The overseer's enforcers. The tallest one's gaze landed on Thomas. You gave away your ration, the voice growled through the mask. To them. Thomas didn't answer. That's against the law, the enforcer continued. The overseer wants you alive for now. Thomas's grip on the metal bar tightened. The enforcer took a step closer. Come quietly, human, or the children will pay for your defiance. His eyes flicked to him, her hand twitching toward the knife at her belt. The air in the room was so tense it felt like it might snap. Thomas knew he had seconds to decide, fight, and risk all of them, or surrender and lose control of his fate. He shifted his weight, ready to move. And then from outside came the deafening crack of gunfire. The walls shook, the enforcers spun toward the noise. Eyes widened in shock. Someone else was here. Gunfire shattered the air again. The sound was hard and flat in the stone corridor, like a hammer on a bell. Dust sifted down from the cracked ceiling. The three enforcers stiffened. The tall one snapped a hand up, signaling the others to cover the doorway. Thomas didn't waste the opening. "Down," he said to the kids. He stepped past them, moving between the enforcers and the little bodies huddled on the floor. His stomach screamed at him. His legs were hollow wood, but his mind snapped into an old, familiar track: cover, angles, distance. The nearest enforcer swung his rifle toward Thomas. The barrel looked as big as a drain pipe up close. Thomas lunged. He didn't go for the gun. He slammed his scrap bar into the joint of the enforcer's wrist, a fast, brutal chop. The rifle tilted and barked. 3 shots tore into the ceiling, showering grit. The enforcer roared. Thomas stepped in and drove his shoulder into the alien's chest plate, hooking his foot behind the ankle. The big figure tipped and crashed sideways. A blade flashed at the edge of his vision. She moved like a coil spring, knife in a reverse grip. She sliced the strap on the second enforcer's rifle, tangled it around the guard's elbow, and yanked. The enforcer stumbled, pivoted, and slammed the pommel of her knife into the back of the mask. The alien staggered into the doorframe. "Move," shouted, not looking. The smallest girl scrambled to the back of the room with the other children, eyes huge and wet. The tall enforcer, the leader, didn't flinch. He fired a short burst at the window, a signal, Thomas realized, then drew a baton from his hip. It hummed with a mean, hungry sound. Thomas's breath burned. He swung the scrap bar again, aiming for the baton hand, but the leader was quick. The humming stick batted the metal aside. Pain lit Thomas's arm from elbow to shoulder. "Human," the leader rasped through the mask. "On your knees." "Not today," Thomas said, because he needed his mouth to stay brave while his body faltered. Outside, the gunfire popped and rattled closer. Someone shouted in the alley in that broken, sing-song dialect this city had worn down over centuries. Fainted at the leader's head. He fast. She danced back, flicking a glance at Thomas that said, "One more second." Thomas changed the angle. He didn't go high. He went low. He dropped to a knee and smashed the scrap bar into the leader's knee joint, where the armor plate met the flexible underlayer. The leader grunted and dipped instinctively. Took the opening. Her knife kissed the seam of the leader's mask, right where the filter joined the faceplate. She didn't stab, she jammed. The tip punched into the filter housing. The baton's hum spiked, then died, choking on its own power. Thomas surged up and ripped the baton free. It still buzzed weakly enough. He turned and cracked the humming stick across the second enforcer's mask as the alien rose from the doorframe. Sparks danced. The enforcer sagged. The third enforcer, the one Thomas had tripped, kicked his legs out like a scythe. Thomas jumped back, breath ragged, came down with her elbow on the enforcer's wrist, pinning it. She locked eyes with Thomas. "Window," she snapped. Thomas spun and saw what she meant. The small window was a square of broken glass and iron, half blocked by debris. The alley beyond was a gray slit between walls. People were shouting and running. A chittering drone skittered across a roofline like a metal crab, then vanished. "Go," he yelled at the kids. One at a time, hands and knees. Crawled first, breath hitching. The others followed, pale hands grabbing the sill, pulling themselves through. The oldest turned and reached for the smallest, pushing gently. Kept the leader pinned against the wall with her blade at his filter. The leader's voice came out like crushed stone. "You think the overseer won't find you, human? You just announced yourself to the whole block." Thomas grabbed the last kid and lifted, too light, too easy, and shoved them through the window. He slid after them, twisting his shoulders to fit. The broken iron scraped his coat, snagging the lining that wasn't there anymore. He hit the alley and rolled, coming up with the baton ready. The alley was a thin canyon of black stone, old pipes crisscrossing overhead like the ribs of a dead beast. The air tasted like iron and cold smoke. 3 figures crouched at the alley mouth, rifles up. Their armor was a patchwork of scavenged plates and cloth wraps, painted with white handprint symbols. Not enforcers, not civilians. "Down," one hissed, jerking the barrel toward the street. Dropped from the window behind Thomas, landed in a crouch, and shoved the kids into the shadow of a dented waste hopper. Thomas backed into the same shadow, keeping his body between the children and the street. "Who are you?" Thomas asked low. Friends, the nearest said, eyes never leaving the alley mouth. For a minute. How long a minute? Said equally low. Until the drones circle, the fighter said. 2, maybe 3. Gunfire stitched across the alley entrance. The fighters answered with short, disciplined bursts. Metal screamed. A drone clipped the corner and pinwheeled, sparking. Someone in the street screamed back, a high alien sound that cut the bone. Back path, said to Thomas. There's a maintenance run behind the water line, up and over to the old conduit. Thomas nodded. Take point. She shook her head. You take the kids, I'll break there. He wanted to argue. He didn't, not now. Stay with me, he told, and the others by extension. Hands on the wall. If I say down, you hug the stone like it loves you. Nodded, her pupils were wide and bright. She trusted him. That trust felt like a mantle, heavy, solid. He adjusted his grip on the baton and kept moving. They slid down the alley, bodies tight to the wall, darted ahead and cut left between 2 leaning stacks of broken ductwork. Thomas followed, kids pressed to his legs like shadows. The maintenance run was a slot hardly wider than Thomas's shoulders, wedged between 2 ancient, sweating water mains. Cold, mineral-smelling condensation slicked the pipes, beating and dripping. The city groaned around them, metal flexing and stone sighing like a sleeping creature. Up, whispered, pointing. An iron ladder climbed into darkness, caked with lime and old grease. Thomas checked the kids. 1 at a time, on my back. He crouched, let her climb up, hooked her legs around his hips, and started up the ladder with careful, deliberate steps. His arms shook with hunger and strain. He kept going. Quitting wasn't a thing that happened while little arms wrapped around your neck. Halfway up, a drone's flashlight beam knifed across the narrow slot below. Voices, metal feet clattered. Hold breath. They froze, even the pipes seemed to hush for a heartbeat. The beam slid on. The voices receded, faint and bitter. They climbed the rest of the way into a low corridor lined with rough-cut stone. It smelled old, older than the city above it. Faint green light pulsed from patches of bioluminescent moss clinging to the mortar. The air hummed softly, as if 1,000 hidden wires vibrated together. The old conduit, said softly. We call these the bone tunnels, built before the black spires, before the flood. Some passages wake, some sleep. What wakes them? Thomas asked. Noise, heat, blood. His gaze flicked to the baton in his hand, then to the kids. Keep to the cold stones. They moved. Thomas listened to his breath, counted steps, kept the kids tight. At a widening in the corridor, an arch of carved stone crossed overhead, etched with alien symbols worn down by centuries of fingers, reached up and touched the lowest glyph while they passed. A little ritual, a mark of home, even here. Why did you do it? She asked quietly, when the kids were a few strides ahead and the tunnel swallowed outside noise. Do what? Give them your food. That is a stupid question in this city, but answer. Because they're kids. Everyone is someone's kid. Not everyone is starving. He let the truth sit there. It felt blunt, not clever. He didn't care. His mouth twitched, not a smile. You know there will be a price. There always is. You were soldier. Combat engineer, he said. Bridges, demolitions, keeping people alive long enough to run away. That last part will help, she nodded at the roof. The overseer's drones track heat first, metal second, you wearing metal. Thomas wanted to toss the baton. He didn't. Instead, he pulled off his torn coat and wrapped the metal stick in it, then hugged the bundle under his arm to keep its heat close to his body. Improvised insulation. It wasn't perfect. It was something. They reached a junction where 3 tunnels met like the ribs of a star. A grate blocked the left-hand passage, bolted to the stone with 8 rusted fasteners the size of a child's fist. Frowned, this wasn't here last week. They're sealing the tunnels, Thomas said. Can you? Yeah, he knelt, set the co-trap baton down, and studied the grate. The bolts were old but recently tightened. He could see the fresh scrape marks where a wrench had bit. No tools, no time. He pulled the fallen enforcer's baton free of the coat and thumbed the stud. The hum stuttered and then steadied. Weak power, enough to arc. Back, he said, shifted the kids behind a low curve of stone. Thomas touched the baton tip to the bolt and pressed. The hum rose, white sparks spat. The stink of hot metal and burned dust filled the air. He counted to 3, lifted, and hit the next bolt. He worked in a star pattern like loosening a wheel. Heat spread into the stone. Sweat stung his eyes. The baton's hum wavered again, dying. Come on, he whispered to it like it was a tired animal. He jammed it against the sixth bolt. Sparks, pop. The head drooped. He hammered the last two with the dead baton's weight, using it as a lever, prying. The grate creaked. Grabbed the top and yanked. It tore free and clanged to the floor. The sound rang down the tunnels like a thrown bell. Go, go, Thomas shoved the kids through. He followed, pulling the grate behind him enough to tangle, not stealthy, delay. They hurried, feet slapping stone. The new passage sloped upward, the light shifting from green to a sickly yellow glow that came from a cracked tube in the ceiling, the last breath of some old power line. The tunnel ended at a hatch. The seal was broken. Someone had it once and then jammed it shut again. Put her shoulder into it. The hatch groaned, then opened with a shock of cold air. They spilled into a chamber under a great floor. Above them, the city rumbled, machinery, voices, something heavy rolling. Through the slats, Thomas saw a market. Rows of stalls under a cloth canopy, piles of scrap, jars of pickled roots, strings of glass charms turning slowly in the draft. People moved in slow streams, hunched and wary. Over it all, a speaker crackled. Citizens of Ward 6, resources are at critical allotment. The overseer decrees sharing is deprivation. Mercy is theft. Report those who break the law, be rewarded. The voice was oil-slick and calm. Propaganda steady as weather. Led them along the underfloor, staying in the shadow of crates stacked on top. An access ladder led up into a stack of old shipping pallets. They climbed into a narrow space behind a stall where a hunched alien with copper rings through his ear fins counted beads. He didn't look up. You're late, he said. Then he did look up and saw Thomas. His pupils shrank, and foolish. Said, we need passage, Hearth Vault. The merchant clicked his tongue, eyes shifting left and right. The vault is watched. Not like the tunnels, said. His gaze flicked to the children. His jaw tightened. You bring cold shadows into my warm house. That is a kind of curse if you believe the old stories. I believe in now, she said flatly. We'll pay later. Later is chalk on water. Her tone cut, please. The merchant exhaled through his teeth, a soft hiss. He nodded toward a stack of broken alloy panels. Through there, left to the waste chute, down 2 levels, then the red door with no handle. Knock 3, pause 1. The vault will decide if it speaks back. Touched his wrist, thank you. He pulled his hand away. You bring trouble. It walks like a man and smells like hunger. Thomas almost smiled, not wrong. They slipped back into above them the speaker cracked again. The same voice, smooth, clean, practiced. Ward 6, it said, almost warm. We are grateful for your vigilance. Today, a human committed an act of theft by sharing food with unlicensed minors. This act weakens us all. He is dangerous. He is called Thomas Hale. Hearing his name spill into the market was like feeling a blade kiss his throat. Report, the voice cooed. The overseer rewards loyalty. His face hardened. She met Thomas's eyes. There was no surprise there, only confirmation. He knows you, she said. Thomas nodded once. He knows fear works best with a name. They moved. The path described took them past the back of a spice stall where a woman ground something sharp and yellow that made Thomas's sinuses flare. Then under a low shelf full of chipped ceramic frogs. Then to a red metal door with no handle, set flush into the stone. Rapped 3 times, pause once. Silence stretched. Again, Thomas whispered. She lifted her hand. The red door clicked, opened a finger's width. A single dark eye peered out. It studied, then flicked to the kids, then to Thomas. It lingered on him. Not him, a voice said behind the door. We don't open for humans. He fed them, said, with his last ration. And now the overseer speaks his name in our market. He will be a crack in our wall. Thomas leaned in, kept his voice level. I don't need sanctuary, he said. They do. Let me bring them through. I'll go back out, draw heat the other way. His head snapped toward him. No. He didn't look at her. It's one problem at a time. Get them safe, then I'll run. Silence, the eye stared. The lock clicked. The door opened wider. A tall alien with a scar across her throat stood inside. She wore a plain tunic and a hard expression. You come with them, she told. Human, you wait here. Turned to Thomas. For the first time, her voice wavered. They won't open again if you stay. I know, he said. Go. Clung to his coat sleeve. Her hands were small and very cold. You said stay with you. He crouched, every joint complaining. You'll stay with, that's the same as staying with me for now. Not the same, she whispered, fierce. He smiled and meant it. I'll find the door again. She looked at him, searching for the lie. He kept his face iron. After a second, she nodded. She let go of his sleeve. The other kids followed through the red door like ducklings. The scar-throated woman paused in the doorway. If you stand when they come, you bleed on my threshold. Wouldn't dream of it, Thomas said. The door shut, the lock thumped, gone. He exhaled and rolled his shoulders. Alone in a narrow lane that smelled like dust and old spices, with the whole market above listening to a voice that wanted his head. He could run. The waste chute was to the right. The underfloor back to the tunnels was behind him. Instead, he slid into the shadow of a broken pillar and looked up through a crack in the boards. You could learn a lot by listening. The propaganda voice softened, like a hand stroking fur in the wrong direction. The human corrupts, it said. He brings rumors of freedom and tricks to steal from our stores. He does not understand our ways. He breaks children with kindness. Thomas's jaw flexed. He rubbed the dead baton with his thumb. The hum was gone. He felt lighter without it, also naked. Footsteps, not the shambling buying and selling pace. Fast, purposeful. He shifted deeper into the shadow and counted heartbeats. A shape blocked the light from the grate. Dark armor, the carved beast mask. The enforcers moved in pairs, then quads, spreading like oil. They stank of ozone and bitterness. A metal boot rang on the grate above his head. Underfloor, one said, he'll take the rat's path. Thomas smiled without humor, accurate. Two more shadows fell across the gap. A new voice joined, smooth as the one in the speaker, but heavier, present like a throat speaking a smile. He won't leave. He cares. That is the leash you loop on yourself. The speaker's voice in person. The overseer's tongue through a guard's throat, or Thomas's stomach tightened through his own. He risked a look. A projection opened in the air above the market stalls, flat and colorless. A tall alien with high cheekbones and eyes like polished stone looked down at the crowd. Robes hung around his small, sharp body like black water. Lines of gold traced his temples. He wasn't in the market in person, but the hackles on Thomas's neck rose anyway. The overseer, or a mouth of him. The projection's gaze swept the stalls, and then, impossibly, it stopped. It settled. Thomas knew it was a trick. He knew projection eyes couldn't see him through a crack in the floor. Still, he felt the weight. Thomas Hale, the projection said almost gently, you make me sad. Thomas didn't move. The projection looked aside as if considering a memory. You were useful once. At when the river burned, you found new paths. You kept your squad alive. He tasted the human word. I reward useful things. Come out, kneel. You'll feed the foundlings your own hands if you keep on this way. That last image was for the crowd. It worked. The market pulled around itself. Across a panel slid aside. His face appeared pale in the dim. Her eyes were sharp, hot. He knows, she breathed. How? Thomas shook his head once. Doesn't matter, get them deeper. I won't leave you. You already did, he said softly, and it made her flinch, and he hated that he'd said it. Go. Her mouth set. I called the fire, she said. What? The gunfire, that was us, she said. A little cell, not smaller. We saw his men move. We were coming for a stash, not for you. But now it's for you, too. He stared at her for a heartbeat that held too much and not enough. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said. She slid the panel back and vanished. The projection's voice shifted. It said, like a teacher calling roll. Thomas went ice cold. The projection smiled, small and terrible. Don't hide behind small doors. That is for small thieves. A hiss crawled through the underfloor like a snake. Drones. They were in the vents now, skittering on the ribs of the city, sniffing heat, sniffing fear. Thomas took a breath, picked a direction, the waste chute. He moved fast and low, hands finding old rivets, knees finding softer dust. He hit the chute mouth, a round hole with a frayed rubber lip, and dropped. The slide was steep. The rubber burned his palms. He hit a bend and bounced, bit his tongue, tasted metal. He hit the bottom in a tangle and rolled, coming up on hands and knees in a pool of lukewarm gray water that smelled like old cooking and old metal. A light flickered overhead. A figure stepped out of the shadow to his left. Armor patched, rifle slung, white handprint on the chest. One of the market fighters, resistance, whatever they called themselves here. You're a hard man to miss, the fighter said, their eyes crinkled. I've seen you before. Thomas wiped water off his face. Doubt it. the fighter said, their voice softened. I was on the other bank. We watched the river light up like a fuse. We called you River Maker. Thomas's jaw clenched. Old names don't buy bread. Maybe not, the fighter said. They stepped forward and offered a hand. But they opened doors. Come on. Our captain wants to meet the man who stole the overseer's voice for a minute. Thomas frowned. I didn't touch his net. You didn't have to, the fighter said. You made him feel that's rarer. They led him through a low corridor into a rust-stained room with a hanging curtain of chain links as a door. Inside, a map was painted on the wall in chalk and grease. Tunnels, vents, cross streets, and circles around certain stalls in the market big as fists. A woman stood in front of it with her back to him, hair bound with copper wire strips likes. She turned when they entered. It was no older, the same eyes, the same blade-cut cheekbones, but time had sharpened them. Lines traced the corners of her mouth where smiles had been swallowed. She wore a patchwork coat and on her hip. Thomas said, shaken. The young slid in behind him, breath quick. Captain, I brought him. The older woman cut her off with a look that held a warning and a wound. Then she looked at Thomas. You and I haven't met, she said, but the overseer has spoken your name in my house for years. Your house? The vaults, the tunnels, the people who throw grit and gears, pick a name, we carry them all. The young bristled, Captain. Later, the captain said. She stepped closer to Thomas, studying his face like a mechanic studying a cracked part. You make a choice in a room with hungry children, she said. You give away your last bite, you break the ward's law, and you bend the ward's heart. The overseer will break you for it if we let him. I'm not your problem, Thomas said. I'm a flare. Use me or let me burn out, but get the kids to a place where drones don't sniff. The captain's eyes flicked to Young, then back to him. You put yourself between small bodies and big boots. That's a kind of leadership my people understand. They'll follow it. She will follow it, she added, and there was a shadow in her voice when she said she. The young flushed, anger and something else lighting her face. I follow the vault, she snapped, not a stranger. He won't be a stranger long, the captain said. She turned to the map. We'll sweep the market in wedges. He'll lock the vents and flood the underfloor with cold. He's done it before. Thomas stepped closer to the map. He has to keep the ward breathing while he hunts or he breaks his own machine. That means 3 ducts stay open. Here, here, and here. He tapped 3 chalk lines. He'll sweep toward this hub. The captain's eyebrows rose. You know his mind. I know the job, Thomas said. You guard the kids, he guards the flow. The captain nodded slowly. We'll cut the sweep then, jam his servos, melt his boots, give me something. Thomas scanned the room, scrap everywhere, old batteries, coils of wire, a broken stove coil. He picked up the coil, it was heavy and black with grease. This, he said, and those, he added, pointing to a crate of glass jars. Grease and glass will make him choose between traction and speed. The captain grinned, brief and feral. Good. Young moved to the table. What do you need me to do? Thomas opened his mouth to assign tasks, and then the chain curtain rattled as if a wind had found it. The captain's smile vanished. She lifted a hand, and all sound in the room seemed to thin. The chain curtain parted. A figure stepped through. He wore no armor. He didn't need it. People stepped back without thinking, like their legs had remembered a lesson their mouths had forgotten. He was tall and thin, robed in black with gold threads curling at his temples. His eyes were the same polished stone as the projection. The air seemed to bend around him, not with heat, but with attention. He smiled at the young first. It was a small, private thing. He looked at the captain next, and there was so much history in that look that even Thomas felt its weight. Then he looked at Thomas. Hello, River Maker, he said. You teach my pets new tricks. The captain's hand went to her and stopped halfway, as if she were fighting her own muscles. Young took a step back. Her knife slid out, hand shaking. The captain said, voice gone dead flat. The overseer inclined his head. Daughter, he said to the captain. Young sucked in a breath so sharp it cut the room. Thomas felt everything tilt. The captain stared at the overseer with eyes that wanted fire. Don't call me that, she said. He smiled again, and this time the mouth barely reached the eyes at all. But that is what you are. He lifted one hand, very slightly. Behind Thomas, something moved in the dark like a metal animal waking. The sound from the dark was not just mechanical, it was predatory. A slow, scraping slide, a click, the hum of something spooling up. Thomas didn't turn his head, not yet. In his peripheral vision, a shape unfolded itself from the shadows, 6 limbs jointed wrong for anything natural, plated in matte black. The thing's body was low and broad, all steel and sinew, its head a wedge of sensor lenses that glowed faint blue. It smelled faintly of ozone and scorched oil. A hunter drone, not the street models, this was military grade. It wasn't just built to track, it was built to kill. The overseer's voice stayed calm, as if he'd simply found Thomas in a quiet alley. You've been an infection in my ward for only a day, human, yet look at the fever you've caused. He stepped further into the chamber, the black robe brushing the chain curtain so softly it barely swayed. His eyes drifted over the map on the wall, the crates, the scrap, then back to Thomas. You have a choice. Thomas didn't answer. You leave with me now alive, or, the overseer's gaze flicked toward the hunter drone. It harvests the air from your lungs in front of these children. The captain, the older, stepped forward, blocking the line between the overseer and Thomas. No one leaves this room with you. The way she said his name was a knife. Smile barely shifted. You'll stand in front of him like that, after all the cycles I kept you breathing. You kept me chained, the captain spat. Thomas's mind ticked in 2 tracks, one watching the conversation, the other mapping every piece of scrap, every possible angle, every reachable tool. The hunter drone had settled into a crouch, claws flexing lightly against the stone floor. If it lunged, there would be no outrunning it. The younger was pressed against the wall near the table, her knife trembling. She looked between her captain and the overseer with wide, darting eyes. She started, but her voice cracked. His gaze slid to her. You didn't know. He smiled wider. 2 halves of the same root, 2 branches in the same wind, and now you meet in a gutter because of this. His eyes returned to Thomas, cold now. Man. Thomas didn't let the words sink in. You came all the way down here just to make threats. Tilted his head. No, I came to collect. The hunter drone surged forward, not a full attack, but a quick testing lunge. Thomas' baton snapping up. The dead weapon hit the drone's head plate with a dull thunk. Useless. The drone didn't even flinch. Its sensors flickered, scanning him. Stop, the captain barked. To Thomas's surprise, the drone did. His eyes narrowed on her. Still think you give the orders. He flicked his fingers, and the drone hissed in response, a sound of steel teeth grinding. Thomas knew this dance. He'd seen warlords use it before. Let the room think you're willing to talk, then strike the instant attention slips. He also knew the overseer wouldn't have risked walking in without an insurance layer. That meant more than 1 drone, probably more than 2. He leaned slightly toward the captain without looking at her. You got a back exit. Her jaw tightened. Blocked 2 cycles ago, only way out is through him. Thomas's eyes scanned the map on the wall, the grease marks, the chalk lines. No, not through him, past him. Took a slow step closer. The drone mirrored him, claws clicking. You're thinking of running, don't bother. Every duct within 30 meters is under my control. Thomas smiled faintly. Good, means I know exactly where you aren't watching. Before could reply, Thomas moved. Fast. He grabbed the crate of glass jars from the floor and hurled it straight down between himself and the drone. The jars shattered, shards skittering across the stone. The hunter drone stepped and slid. Its claws, meant for gripping, scraped against the grease-slick glass like skates on ice. Now, Thomas shouted. The captain reacted instantly, slamming her shoulder into. It didn't knock him down, but it broke his focus for 1 breath. 1 was enough. The younger darted past the drone, skidding on the shards but staying upright. She grabbed Thomas's arm, yanking toward the curtain. His voice cut through the chaos. You think I need the drone to kill you? The temperature in the room seemed to dip. Thomas didn't look back, didn't want to see what expression went with that tone. They burst through the chain curtain into the outer tunnel. The sound of claws scraped behind them. The drone had recovered. Left, the captain shouted, pushing Thomas ahead. Go low. They ducked into a side passage barely tall enough for Thomas to crouch in. Pipes ran along the walls, dripping condensation. The sound of the drone grew louder. It wasn't slowed now. Dead end, the younger hissed. Not if we make one, Thomas said. His hands were already on the stove coil from earlier, jamming it between two pipe joints. Captain Power. She grabbed a cable hanging from the wall, ripped the insulation with her teeth, and jammed the bare wire to the coil. Sparks leapt. The coil glowed, the air filling with the smell of hot metal and steam. The drone rounded the corner and hit the heated coil dead on. The temperature spike made its sensors flare, throwing its aim off. It staggered for half a second. That was all Thomas needed. He shoved a length of rusted pipe into its front joint and twisted hard. The sound of grinding metal echoed in the passage. The drone toppled sideways, legs jerking like cut cables. The captain's voice was sharp. Move before sends the others. They ran, the tunnel pitched upward, narrowing until it was barely wider than Thomas's shoulders. The younger was breathing hard, her steps ragged. "Why?" she gasped. "Why did you come back? You could run when the kids went in the vault." Thomas didn't answer right away. The light ahead was getting brighter, not the pale green of moss, but the cold white glare of daylight filtered through dust. Finally, he said, "Because if I run, he wins, and I'm sick of watching men like him win." They emerged into a ruin above ground, crumbling stone columns, a cracked plaza choked with weeds. In the distance, the spires of the city stabbed into the haze. The captain stopped, scanning the horizon. "Won't let this go, you've marked yourself." Thomas smirked, though his chest was still burning from the sprint. "So have you." The captain's gaze locked on his. "Then we make the next move before he does." From behind them, deep in the tunnels, came the low, rising hum of more drones waking. The hum of drones grew, crawling up from the tunnels like a swarm of metal hornets. Thomas knew that sound. It was the noise before things went bad fast. The captain's eyes swept the plaza. "We can't stay in the open, ruins not defensible, too many." Thomas crouched beside a toppled column, scanning the ground. The weeds here grew tall and dry, hiding fragments of old tech half buried in the soil, shattered comm panels, corroded power cells. "What's our nearest safe zone?" The captain shook her head. "There's no safe. Closest thing is the hollow yard 2 blocks east. It's a scrapyard, too much cover for drones to get a clean lock." Thomas eyed the skyline. East was toward the haze and jagged rooftops, but between here and there were at least 3 open streets. "We'll never make it if we go straight." The younger stepped up, knife still in hand. "Then we don't go straight, we cut through the bone gardens." The captain gave her a sharp look. "That path been sealed since." "It's open now," cut in. "I saw scavengers in there last week." Thomas didn't like the sound of bone gardens, but the hum from the tunnels was getting louder. "Then that's our route. Move." They ducked into the shadow of the plaza's broken archway, slipping into a narrow lane between 2 leaning walls. The air here was thick with dust and the faint, sour tang of decay. The bone gardens weren't gardens in the living sense. They were a graveyard, an old alien burial field sunken into the earth. Rows of tall, thin markers leaned at odd angles, carved with symbols worn smooth by wind and time. Between them, half-collapsed vaults gaped like broken mouths. Pale remains lay tangled with roots, some still wearing scraps of burial cloth. The younger kept her head down, moving fast between the markers. "Drones hate this place. Too much mineral in the soil messes with their scanners." Thomas glanced at the captain. "That true?" She nodded once. "Also, the locals believe the dead here curse the living who spill blood on their ground." Thomas looked at her sideways. "You believe it?" "I believe the drones avoid it. That's enough." They weaved deeper. The markers grew taller, the air colder. Somewhere to their left, a stone slab shifted with a low grinding sound. Thomas froze, scanning. The weeds rustled, not from wind. The captain stiffened. "We're not alone." From between 2 vaults, 3 figures emerged. They weren't enforcers, no armor, no masks. Their clothes were patchwork, their faces gaunt and sharp. Scavengers. Each carried a weapon cobbled together from scrap, a hooked blade, a nail-studded club, a short crossbow made from pipe. The lead scavenger's eyes locked on Thomas. "Human," he rasped. "The overseer's got a price on you." Thomas's grip tightened on his baton. "Then you'll be disappointed." The scavenger grinned with teeth filed to points. "No, we'll be fed." They lunged. Thomas the first swing, the hook whistling past his ribs. He jammed the baton into the attacker's gut and shoved him into a marker. The younger ducked under the club and drove her knife into the scavenger's thigh, twisting. The man screamed, dropping his weapon. The captain moved like water, parrying the crossbow with her forearm and snapping the wielder's wrist with a sharp twist. The bolt clattered to the ground. "Move," Thomas barked. They broke into a run, leaving the wounded scavengers cursing behind them. But the fight had cost them seconds, and in those seconds the hum of drones shifted pitch. Higher now, closer. They broke out of the bone gardens onto a cracked avenue, the hollow yard's rusted fence visible at the far end. Beyond it, jagged mounds of scrap metal rose like mountains. "Almost there," the captain said, and then the first drone crested the roofline ahead. It wasn't a small scout. This was a sweeper, broad, flat body, four jointed arms tipped with clamps and cutters, a belly studded with sensors. It spotted them instantly. The white beam of its scanner swept across the street. Thomas grabbed the captain's shoulder. "Scatter." They dove in different directions as the sweeper's arms lashed out. One clamp tore a chunk from the wall where Thomas had been a heartbeat before. He rolled behind a pile of rubble, breath ragged, scanning for anything usable. His eyes fell on a cluster of old power cells half buried in the dirt. He shouted, "Toss me your knife." She hesitated for half a second, then flung it. Thomas caught it by the handle, jammed it under the lip of the nearest power cell, and hard. The casing cracked, blue light spilling out in a hiss of ozone. The sweeper turned toward him. Thomas grabbed the cell, yanked it free, and hurled it. The cell hit the sweeper's side and exploded in a flash of white-blue light. The drone reeled, one arm sparking. "Run," Thomas roared. They sprinted for the hollow yard fence. The captain vaulted first, then Thomas. Behind them, the sweeper recovered and began to climb the fence, sparks still spitting from its damaged arm. They dropped into the yard. The air here was metallic and hot, the ground uneven with heaps of rusted machinery. Shadows shifted between the piles, and Thomas realized they weren't alone. Figures emerged from the scrap, armed, watching. Not enforcers, not scavengers, something else. The captain froze. "There," she said quietly, "and they don't like visitors." One of them stepped forward, a tall alien with a mask made of welded machine parts. His voice was a low growl. "You've brought the overseer's eyes to our door. Give me one good reason not to feed you to his machines." From behind, the fence rattled as the sweeper began to tear its way through. Thomas stepped forward, meeting this gaze. "Because I can make sure his machines never cross this yard again." The tilted his head, bold words human. Thomas's lips curved into something between a grin and a challenge. "Then give me the tools and watch." Behind them, metal screamed as the sweeper broke the last of the fence. The hollow yard was a maze of rust and shadow. Towers of twisted rebar leaned like the bones of giants. Crushed vehicle frames lay in heaps, their sharp edges catching the pale light. Everywhere Thomas looked, there was scrap, raw material for something nasty. The sweeper drone slammed through the fence behind them, its cutter arms whirring like a hive of angry wasps. Sparks rained as it stepped into the yard. The leader didn't move. His mask, welded from gears and plates, tilted slightly. "You have 30 breaths, human." Thomas turned in a slow circle, mapping the terrain. The younger hovered at his side, knife ready. The captain stood farther back, eyes flicking between the sweeper and the... "Tools," Thomas said to the leader. "Cable, wire, any live cells you've got." They made a hand signal. Two masked figures vanished into the scrap piles, returning moments later with coils of wire, a sack of cracked batteries, and a length of steel chain so heavy two of them had to carry it. Thomas dumped the batteries onto the ground, sorting fast. Most were dead. He found 3 with juice, just enough. He said, not looking up, "I need you to bait it. Close enough it commits, far enough you don't get clipped." Her eyes widened. "Bait." "You're quicker than me," Thomas said. "Just make it chase." The captain bristled. "She's not." "It's that or it eats all of us," Thomas snapped. The younger hesitated for only a heartbeat, then nodded sharply. "Fine." She darted toward the sweeper, moving between scrap towers. The drone's sensors locked on her instantly. It lunged, cut her arms swinging. She dove left, rolled, came up running again. "Good girl," Thomas muttered under his breath. He wrapped the steel chain in wire, leaving a loose coil at one end, then fastened the 3 live batteries in a crude series using scavenged clamps. The whole thing looked like it would fry him if he touched the wrong part, which was the point. The sweeper followed deeper into the yard. Its heavy body crunched over broken gears and plates. It didn't care about noise, it didn't need to. "Captain," Thomas said, "find me the highest point in this yard, something I can drop from." She pointed to a rusted crane still standing at the yard's far edge. Its long boom arm sagged, but the frame was solid enough. "Perfect." He dragged the coiled trap toward the crane, the leader watching silently. When they reached it, Thomas tossed the weighted chain over the boom's hook and hauled it back down, so both ends dangled in the air like a noose. "Now we wait for our dance partner," Thomas said. The captain climbed the crane with him. From the boom, they had a clear view of the yard. Was a darting shadow, keeping just ahead of the sweeper's lunges, drawing it exactly where Thomas wanted. When she was close enough, Thomas shouted, "Left." She pivoted, sprinting under the boom's arc. The sweeper followed without hesitation, its cutter arms slicing through a stack of scrap like paper. Thomas let the chain drop. It fell true, wrapping over the sweeper's broad top plate, sliding between the cutter arms. "Now," Thomas said, and jammed the live wire into the battery link. The chain lit with blue-white arcs, the hum turning into a violent crackle. The smell of burning insulation filled the air. The sweeper convulsed, its arms flailing, sensors strobing wildly. Then, with a sound like a breaker snapping, it froze. Smoke hissed from its joints. A few sparks spat from its belly sensors, and then it collapsed sideways into the scrap, dead. Stopped, chest heaving, staring at the smoking wreck. It worked. Thomas climbed down, checking the wreck's sides for any twitch of movement. "Nothing. Of course it worked," he said. "It's just metal, and metal breaks." The leader stepped forward, studying Thomas through the mask. "You kept your word." "I said I'd make sure they wouldn't cross this yard again," Thomas replied. "That's one. If you want to make it permanent, I'll show you how to rig the rest of the perimeter." The leader tilted his head. "You would give us your tricks." Thomas met his gaze levelly. "If you feed the kids in the vault for the next 3 days, no questions." The leader was silent for a moment, then he extended a gloved hand. "Done." Thomas shook it. The metal fingers were cold even through the glove. The captain stepped closer, her voice low. "You're not just buying them food, Hale, you're buying yourself allies. Don't forget a favor like this." "Good," Thomas said. "We're going to need every friend we can get." Before the captain could reply, the younger's voice cut in, sharp and urgent. "We've got a bigger problem." They turned. At the far end of the yard, beyond the torn fence, more drones were arriving, not sweepers, but tall, two-legged walkers with mounted cannons and shields. Behind them, a column of overseers' enforcers marched in tight formation. And walking at their head, as calm as if he were taking a stroll through a garden, was himself. "You killed one of his toys," the captain said grimly. "Now he's bringing the ones that don't break so easy." The leader growled low. "Then the yard will run red." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "Not if I can make him bleed first." Stopped just outside the fence, his eyes lifting to meet Thomas's across the sea of rust and ruin. The overseer smiled. "Round 2, Rivermaker." Soldiers stood in a perfect black and silver line behind him, rifles shouldered, shields locked. The walkers, cannons tracked in slow, predatory arcs. Overhead, drones hovered like carrion birds. The yard was quiet except for the faint creak of scraps settling in the wind. Thomas didn't wait for opening speech. "Captain," he said without looking away from the overseer, "we're not holding this ground by fighting him head-on. We're holding it by making him regret stepping foot in here." The captain's eyes flicked toward the high piles of junk. "You want a trap?" "I want layers of traps," Thomas said. "We'll make this place a coffin." The leader stepped closer, his mask's welded gears catching the dim light. "You'll have our scrap, our people, and our tools, but we've got minutes, not hours." "That's all I need." They split fast. Into the stacks, hauling chains, heavy panels, coils of wire, and jars of thick black grease. The captain organized a firing line behind a barricade of crushed vehicle frames. Thomas climbed the crane again, scanning the terrain. The yard was a death maze if you knew where to force your prey: narrow choke lanes, unstable towers, blind corners. He picked 3 kill zones, mentally marking them. "First kill zone," he shouted down. "Grease the ground, then lay the panels on top. Leave a gap at the end for them to overcommit." 2 ran to work. "Second zone," Thomas called to the captain. "Get sharpshooters into those high nests." He pointed to a cluster of stacked drums and an old tower of scaffolding. They'll have angles on anyone trying to flank. And the third, she asked. Thomas's grin was sharp. That's for. The younger appeared at the base of the crane, breathless. They're moving, she said. Walkers first, enforcers behind. Thomas climbed down fast. Good, that means they're confident. The captain was already signaling her people into position. The leader passed Thomas a bundle of glass bottles. Old fuel, he said. Still burns. Thomas tied strips of cloth into each bottle's neck, dipping them into a drum of grease. Molotovs, primitive, but they'll do the job. The first walker stepped through the breach in the fence. It was huge up close, its legs piston-thick, its cannon swiveling toward the barricade. Let it come in, Thomas whispered. The walker's front foot hit the first grease panel. It slid. Metal shrieked as its weight shifted wrong. The second foot came down hard, cracking the panel, and then it pitched sideways into the pile of scrap stacked exactly for that moment. The pile collapsed like an avalanche, burying the walker in a rain of jagged steel. Its cannon went off once, wild, punching a hole in the sky. Now, Thomas shouted. From the nests, sharpshooters opened fire. Glass and metal bit into the enforcers behind the walker. They roared and added their fire, driving the line back into the choke point. Didn't flinch, he stepped around the trapped walker, gesturing to the second one. Advance. This walker moved slower, testing its footing. The captain barked a signal, and the sharpshooters shifted fire to its legs, forcing it to angle into the second kill zone. Here, the ground was littered with coils of cable Thomas had rigged to a single live battery bank. As the walker's foot came down, Thomas threw a lever. The cables sparked violently, sending a surge through the walker's frame. It froze for just long enough for two to lob Molotovs onto its top plate. The fire spread fast, licking up the cannon mount. The walker staggered back, flames reflecting in its cold eyes. He raised a hand. His soldiers advanced in unison, shields locking. The drones dropped lower, their scanners sweeping the yard. The third kill zone was still untouched. Time for the fun part, Thomas said. He grabbed the younger's shoulder. I'm going to draw him in. When I yell, you cut the winch cable on the crane. Got it? Her brow furrowed. That'll drop the whole boom. That's the point. Before she could argue, Thomas stepped out from cover, making sure saw him. The overseer's gaze locked instantly. Finally, he called, his voice carried clear across the yard. Are you done hiding, Rivermaker? Not hiding, Thomas said. Just waiting for you to walk into the right spot. Smile was thin. Kill him. Two drones swooped toward Thomas. He ran, zigzagging between scrap piles, making just enough noise to keep focused. The overseer advanced, his soldiers keeping pace, pushing deeper into the yard. Thomas led them right under the crane. Now, he bellowed. From above, the younger slashed the cable. The crane boom groaned, then dropped like a guillotine. The steel arm smashed into the ground between and his soldiers, scattering drones, crushing two enforcers outright. Dust and sparks filled the air. Staggered back, eyes narrowing. For the first time, Thomas thought he saw something like irritation. You think this stops me? Said voice low. No, Thomas replied, but it makes me feel better. Took one slow step forward, and then the ground under him shuddered. The final part of Thomas's plan was simple. He'd loosened the supports on a tall scrap tower right beside the crane. The crane's fall had jostled it just enough. With a deep metallic groan, the entire tower tipped. Rusted girders and engine blocks poured down like an avalanche, burying the spot where stood. The yard went still except for the hiss of fire. The captain appeared at Thomas's side, eyes scanning the heap. Do you think? A clang echoed from beneath the pile. Then another, and then a black-gloved hand punched up through the scrap. Pulled himself into view, dust streaking his robe, one eye bleeding down his cheek. His voice was calm. This was entertaining. The younger's breath hitched. He's still. Lifted a small transmitter from his belt and pressed it. Somewhere beyond the yard, a deep mechanical roar answered. Thomas's stomach dropped. That wasn't a drone, that was something bigger. The roar was deep enough to shake the scrap under Thomas's boots. It didn't sound like machinery in the usual sense. It sounded alive. The captain's face went grim. That's a war beast. Thomas's eyes narrowed. A what? A ground leviathan, old war-era construct, part machine, part vat-grown flesh. He keeps one for when he wants to break a district in hours, not days. Perfect, Thomas muttered. I was worried this day might get boring. The ground trembled as it approached. Scrap towers rattled, sending cascades of bolts and plates clattering down, shifted uneasily in the shadows of their cover. Even the drones seemed to pull back, giving whatever was coming room to enter. It appeared through the breach in the fence, like a nightmare wearing armor. The war beast's body was a hulking mix of plated metal and rippling, corded muscle. Its head was a wedge of bone-reinforced alloy with a jaw that could bite through a truck chassis. 6 massive legs churned the ground, each ending in claws like mining drills. Tubes and cables ran along its spine into a saddle-like control pod mounted near its shoulders. Climbed into that pod like a man settling into a throne. From the height of the beast, he looked down into the yard, eyes locking on Thomas. One way or another, he said, voice amplified over the yard, you die here. Thomas didn't waste time arguing. He turned to the captain. Tell me you've got explosives. Some, not enough to bring that down. Doesn't need to come down, Thomas said. Just needs to go where I want it. He sprinted toward the far side of the yard, barking orders as he ran. Collapse the east piles when I give the signal. You're with me. The younger caught up fast, knife still in hand. What's the plan? Thomas glanced back at the war beast as it lumbered forward, crushing piles of scrap like dry leaves. We're going to feed it the yard. The idea was simple in theory, suicidal in practice. The hollow yard's east wall backed onto one of the oldest, deepest bone gardens, and under that, according to the captain's map, were the bone tunnels. Parts of those tunnels were unstable, collapsed in places. If they could lure the war beast onto the wrong patch, the ground might do the killing for them. Stay close, Thomas said as they darted between towers. He grabbed 2, grease and fuel, we make it follow. They smashed jars along the ground, igniting them with rags. The war beast's head swung toward the sudden light and heat, leaned forward in the saddle, and the beast surged after them with terrifying speed for its size. Scrap towers toppled in its wake, sending shockwaves through the yard. Now, Thomas yelled. They on the east side shoved with all their strength, collapsing a massive pile into the narrow lane between the beast and the rest of the yard. They'd cut off its retreat. Didn't hesitate, he drove the beast harder, straight toward Thomas and... Faster, Thomas shouted. They sprinted for the thin stretch of ground just before the east wall. Thomas could feel the vibrations getting sharper, the hollow echo of unstable earth beneath. They reached the spot and dove aside at the last moment. The war beast charged over and the ground cracked. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the soil and stone gave way in a roar of dust and splintering supports. The beast dropped into the collapsing tunnels, its claws scrabbling for purchase. Chunks of old masonry and bone rained down on it. Leapt from the saddle, landing hard on the yard's edge, rolling once before coming to his feet. His robe was torn, dust smeared across his face, but his eyes burned with cold fury. Thomas pushed himself up, coughing from the dust. Looks like your pet needs a rescue. His gaze was like a knife. You think this ends because you found a hole in my ground. He lunged. For a man in ceremonial robes, he moved with shocking speed. A blade slid from his sleeve, thin and black. Thomas barely brought the baton up in time to block, the impact jarring his arm to the elbow. The captain appeared from the side, firing a short burst from her. Twisted, the shots sparking off his shoulder plate. He kicked her back with enough force to send her into a scrap pile. Darted in from behind, knife aimed for his ribs, but caught her wrist mid-strike, twisting until she gasped. Thomas grabbed a length of loose chain from the ground and swung it, wrapping it around sword arm. Let her go. Shoved away and turned his full strength on Thomas. The chain pulled taut, metal biting into both their hands. Thomas felt the man's power, wiry, precise, relentless. But Thomas wasn't fighting for dominance. He was buying time. Now, he roared. From above, the leader dropped one of the last live battery bundles straight onto the chain. The shock tore through both men. Thomas gritted his teeth and took it, screamed, the sound raw and animal. The blade dropped from his hand. Thomas kicked him back toward the edge, stumbled, and the weakened ground gave way. He fell into the pit where the war beast thrashed below. The last thing Thomas saw was hand reaching up, fingers curling in silent promise before the rubble closed over him. The yard was silent, except for the distant groan of settling earth. Was at Thomas's side in seconds. You killed him. Thomas shook his head. Men like him don't die easy, but he's gone for now. The captain joined them, one arm cradling her side. That was reckless, she said, but there was something almost like respect in her voice. Thomas looked toward the vault in the distance. We've got 3 days of food for the kids. After that, the captain said, you'll have the yard, the vault, and the bone tunnels watching your back. The younger's gaze lingered on him, not just watching, following. He met her eyes, reading the unspoken weight there. She'd seen him give up his last meal, risk himself for strangers, and turn a scrap heap into a battlefield. In her mind, he wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was the one worth following. That night, as the fires in the hollow yard burned down to embers, Thomas sat on a pile of twisted steel, listening to the wind in the spires. Somewhere far below, the earth shifted, maybe the beast dying, maybe clawing his way free. Either way, the war wasn't over. But for the first time since he'd set foot on this world, Thomas felt something like hope. And he knew that when the overseer came again, and he would, they'd be ready.